Welcome to the Overly Opinionated podcast. Rest in peace of fallen kings, queens, and in-betweens.
And free the guys.
Yes, sir. So, another week of new audio. I think I've found a couple of tricks that'll help us out. But we haven't had the opportunity to get feedback yet because we record ahead. So, whatever problems y'all had, we'll find out after we record this. So, we got a little bit of a looser topic today. But to me, it feels like one of the most important things that I've encountered, like one of the most important tools that I've used. And it is going through the phase of parental forgiveness. Like, I forgave my parents for all of the wrongs that I felt like they did in parenting, all of the things that make me who I am. The traumas, the shortcomings, what I saw as shortcomings before. I've, when you forgive them, if you feel so empathetic, like it really gave birth to like this strong empathy to the rest of the human beings that you encounter.
How long did it take you?
When you ask how long did it take me, do you mean once I realized that they needed forgiving, or like in my life, how old was I?
So, I mean, the moment you feel like they wronged you to the moment you forgave them.
Oh, man, I felt like they wronged me my whole life.
Them for real?
Yeah.
Wow.
Do people... Wait. This would be news to me. Do people not feel that way?
I do not feel that way. I didn't feel wrong. When I say wrong, I mean strictly like bad parenting, I should say. Like you didn't try your best. I mean that.
Okay.
I didn't feel wrong until I became a parent.
Really?
Yeah.
Bro, I was expecting the exact opposite. Because I felt like there were so many situations where they should have been doing better. Like while I was growing up, I'm like, man, this life was tough.
I didn't understand life,
right,
as much as I did now. So which is weird. I didn't expect more.
Oh, this is insane to me.
I didn't expect more from a mom.
This is so interesting because it sounds like you're saying because you didn't expect much, because you didn't enjoy life, you expected less than what you received.
Yes. And then as I got older...
Did I say understand or enjoy life? Because you didn't understand life, you expected less than you received.
Correct.
It was the exact opposite for me. Like, I didn't understand life, and TV shows you, like, families with their shit together.
Yeah.
So I'm like, why can't you be... Like, why is this so much darker than all the other realities that I see? Why are you struggling so much more than all of these other examples?
Yeah, so I was never the type what I seen was on TV was real. That was never me.
Never.
Oh, wrestling. I took that back. But like I didn't compare that to my life. So like I didn't really put two and two together. But when I got older and out the house and started like navigating through life, it's like, damn, my mom really fucked me like. And there's no way what I remember her doing, there was no way this was the best she can do.
Wow, bro, this is shocking to me.
So, and then being a parent, it's like, I don't even feel like you gave me the bare minimum. And I seen what she was lacking in. And then again, it wasn't a problem when I was young. It definitely hit me when I got older, for sure. And I'm actually going through that process of forgiveness. Like, I'm still upset.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually what I was going to ask you because being that I went through it opposite you, I didn't understand, so I judged harshly. And as I became an adult, I was like, oh, no, this shit is actually impossible. What she did was impossible. So, of course, this is incredible for statistically what she should have done.
Mm-hmm.
So it was real easy to start the process of forgiveness because I'm like, oh, this is amazing. What you're doing is amazing. So I'm curious as to how that process is going for you, being as you saw it as what she was doing was terrible.
So I'm about to tell you why. So I was just like you, okay? Like, this woman is doing superhero shit.
When were you just like me?
Growing up. Like, I feel like she was doing superhero shit growing up. But then I realized she was the villain too. Like, when I say that, she's committing the crimes and then solving it. Like, you're digging yourself in the hole and then getting yourself up out of it. Just make a better decision. Like, and the decisions I feel like she made that I realized when I got older is like, why the fuck would you ever make a decision like that? So I think all the bad decisions she made, I feel like there were no brainers for me. Like, just don't do that.
Now, isn't it possible that yes, it's a no-brainer for you, but it's a no-brainer for you because you've watched somebody make the wrong decision?
I don't know. Maybe this is...
Bro, do you hear what the question that I asked you was, isn't it possible?
I seen someone do wrong, so I know not to do that.
Yeah.
I don't know. And this could be...
Again. The question is, isn't it...
Yes, it's possible. Yes,
all right.
It's possible.
Now, I'm not saying that you have to buy that wholesale. All I'm saying is, if you take that into consideration, then maybe she was doing the best that she knew.
Yes. But again, I know this is unhealed me talking. But listen, I know. I'm aware. But I feel like I feel like she should have known more. Like,
well, that's just unfair to say. That's unfair to say to somebody.
Hear me out though. Like, I'm the fourth child. You ain't get it down by the fourth?
You think having children makes it easier to have children?
It's easier to raise children when you have more. Like,
bro,
when I say that,
such a blanket statement.
When I say that, when you have your first child, okay, this is new to you. All right, I get it. Then when you have your second, okay, you went through this before. It's just like your statement. Like, you seen it happen. You seen this be done. Second go around should be easier, right?
I don't know if that's the case.
What? I feel like it has to. I really feel like it has to be the case. If you run a race with a track 4 times, by that 4th time, you should know something about this track than before when you ran it the first time. Like, you should get used to this. It's the 4th go around. It should not still be horrible like your first child. You're telling me you're not learning anything?
I think
you feel me?
Well, okay, I understand. Don't let me invalidate your take on this, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But I think what you're saying is that when you race one guy on the track, it should be just as easy when you're racing 6 guys. And that's like, yes, you learned how to race with one guy. Like, when you learned how to raise one kid, I don't know that necessarily taught you how to raise 2. Like, you get used to the way things are with the experience that you have. Just like if you raise a girl, like you've raised a girl for 5 years, almost 6 now.
Right. Be 6 this year.
Congrats, by the way.
Thank you.
I don't know if that would necessarily be the case. Like, I'm sure there would be differences if you raised a son now. You know what I mean?
Right. Yes.
So what? I don't know how you can say that just because you've raised a kid, you should be great at raising kids now.
Okay, so what's your logic? She raised a boy and a girl.
No, that's not. So,
but I know she didn't raise multiple at one time.
That's all I'm saying. All I'm saying is, can't you see it being more difficult to be a parent when you have to be a parent for more children?
Okay, yes. So my oldest brother is 10 years older than me. You're not raising him anymore at that point when we were born. Like, when you got your
Wait, because he's 10? You're saying you stopped raising kids at 10?
that's less responsibility. But when you get your second boy after 10 years, you know how to raise a boy. Would you agree?
No.
And backstory, my mom raised kids before she even had kids.
Okay.
So kids is nothing new to her. She ran a daycare. Like, again.
Look, no, Darian, I think you're missing, and I understand that this is, like you said, your unhealed self. But I think you're missing the point of just because there were better ways that they could have handled things, just because there are better decisions that they could have made, I don't think it's fair to say that they could have made them. Like, the tools that most parents had to raise children weren't what I would consider comfortably adequate for raising children.
I agree.
That's the leeway that I give my parents because, you know, society kind of, until you're able to have children, they always stress to you to not have kids until you're ready.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't take much time into my adulthood to realize ready, like parent ready, is not a thing. Like, being prepared to, like, develop a human being is just, that's a lofty goal. Like, to be fully prepared to raise a human, like, that's a lofty goal. And the places from which we come, we have fewer resources than even the average person.
Facts.
So, like, what are you supposed to do? And you got to think, we come from a long line of people who just didn't even have the ability to be ready. As ready as the average person, I mean.
Just don't have kids.
Sure, man, but then you don't exist. And that's not, as much as some ways of thinking could say that may be preferable, once you're here, it's not.
Facts.
And since you're here, as the thinking person here, like, you being here is important.
So, also, now, I'm the way I am because of my parents.
Of course.
Why she couldn't break that bad cycle? Like,
whoa. This is, okay, go ahead.
Why did it, okay, you're able to realize this. I'm able to realize this bad decision. Why wasn't she able to realize this? Okay, by the way, my mom has 6 kids. Like,
yeah.
Why did it take all these? And honestly, I don't even know if she realized it.
Sure.
Like, why? Like, I'm a product of you, and you didn't even wrap your head. You didn't even grasp this.
Yep.
So, what you think about that?
What I think about that, and I'm very happy to give this perspective. I think you're counting the misses without counting the hits. Out of all the generational curses that you see and you're like, man, why couldn't you have known this? Why couldn't you have given me this? There are a lot of things that you ain't have to face that she did. I'm certain of it. And I don't even know your mom. Like, I'm sure there's things that you had to, that she made sure you didn't have to face, that she lived through. So I think there are definitely generational curses that she protected you from.
I agree with you on that. Definitely agree with you on that. And then I do know a couple she protected me from. But again, like, as a parent, I just feel like that's your job.
No, of course. Like, no. Okay. So look, so if we agree that as a parent, you want to put an end to all the generational curses that you could find.
Mm-hmm.
You want to give the best life possible. But when you say best life possible and all the ones that you can find, there's only so many that you know of.
Facts.
There's only so much you can do.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you don't even realize there's a curse.
Right. So for me as a youngin', it was real easy to see those curses and be like, why are you doing this? But as I got older, it was easy for me to see the ones that I didn't deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm seeing my homies turn into, the people that they are because of their parents. And I'm like, oh, I didn't have to deal with that. I'm seeing people who had it worse off, who were worse off in certain aspects of life. And I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't have to deal with that. Or I'm learning more about my parents and realizing what they had to deal with. And I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't have to face that. So there's an appreciation deep within me for the things that I've come to realize I didn't have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
The things that I know that they had to deal with in order to get me to this point. And then there's an even deeper appreciation for all the shit I don't know. Because I'm sure there's shit I don't know that I would be horrified by knowing that I was ungrateful in the past,
Yeah.
But I want to get a female's perspective on this, as well as get a perspective of someone who's a parent.
Okay.
Like who's deep into her parenthood. I'm pretty sure her son is like 16 or something.
Oh.
So we're gonna have Gabby from
Pretty Social
Podcast. Go check it out on all the platforms that you know of.
Hello.
What's up, Gabby? It's Savon from the Overly Opinionated Podcast. I'm here with Darian of the
Hey,
Overly
guys.
Opinionated Podcast.
How are you both?
Doing very well. How about
Great.
yourself?
Good. I'm good. I'm doing really good.
So today on the podcast, we're talking about parental forgiveness, as the children forgiving their parents.
Okay.
First, is this something that you ever had to deal with from your
for sure.
side to your parents?
Yeah, definitely.
What types of things were you forgiving?
So it was more so the situation with my mom. Kind of background information is she has a neurodegenerative disease, and basically it just means her brain is progressively dying much faster. And with that comes like a cognitive decline, mental illness. So she began to change a lot and treat people very differently. And I was kind of like the one who was getting it the most. And we never understood why. We didn't know anything about this when she started to decline. And she would just say a lot of like really, really mean and hurtful things that was often very hurtful and confusing. And I definitely built up a lot of animosity to her during that time because I just didn't understand what was going on. And then obviously when we found out what disorder she was suffering from and understanding that this was actually not her, it was the disease itself, changing that, it gave me better insight on, where that was coming from and how to move forward in forgiving her in that.
Now, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't consider that her fault. Now, did you ever have to forgive your mom for something that was her fault?
That was her fault.
Yeah. So let me give you an example. So
Okay.
You're older now. You can see bad parenting in people, correct?
Of course. Yeah.
Now, do you realize anything your mom did growing up that you realized, oh, this is bad parenting, and had to forgive her for that?
I would say from my mom, it's so hard because she was born with this disease, so we never really know when her symptoms started and what what really stemmed from it. So it's hard. I mean, there have been things that she's done or overreacted in situations, but I can't 100% differentiate if that was just bad parenting from her.
Gotcha.
Or if that was an early sign of a symptom that we just had no idea of. So there's definitely things I can forgive her for, but to say that this was absolutely her fault or this absolutely was not her fault is kind of a blurred line for me in that situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how long would you say you built up the resentment?
Oh gosh, years. I mean, I think I started to build up the resentment probably early 20s, like 2021. And that lasted until we knew about the disease, which I was around 29.
Wow,
And
it came later.
it came we didn't find out about this until it was just before I turned 30. I was 29 and didn't know anything about this. Just, we knew something was off, but we didn't know what. And I definitely had animosity. I mean, I always loved her, but I was so confused because she was so different than who she was from what I remember being younger. And I honestly at times would think like maybe she just hates me, maybe for some reason she just developed a hatred to me and I don't know why. So I definitely had a lot of resentment for a long time. And if I'm honest, there are still times that I struggle with it. Even though I know now, and I know better, that when she gets into those moments where she says things, I have to remind myself, okay, it's the disease. It's the disease. It's not her. But that doesn't mean that I don't still struggle with, like, dang, you see me over here doing all this stuff for you, sacrificing life for you, doing like, and this is how you repay me. It almost feels like that. And it kind of sucks because I don't want to make her feel bad. Like, and I don't even think I can make her feel bad because usually when she's in that state, it's almost like a lack of emotion. So that's even hard because it's like, you're like hurting me right here. And like, I'm crying in front of your face and it's just like, you could care less. So there's still parts of resentment that I have to like struggle with, but I have to always try to remind myself, like, usually it's me going to my room, shutting the door and just like breathing through it and just being like, okay, it's almost like if you had a toddler and they're in their terrible twos and you're like, okay, I get it. This is the season we're in. And no, it's not acceptable. No, I don't like it, but this is just the season we're in. So it's kind of like dealing with a toddler.
Wow.
Now, I know you said you forgave her. Mm-hmm. At any point, were you upset with yourself for the years of missing out on that relationship because you were upset and then it comes out it wasn't really her fault?
Wow.
Yes, to a degree, but only because in this particular situation, there would be so many times I try to reach out, so many times that I would try to mend the relationship that I thought I was at least mending the relationship, that she would just completely like close me out. It was like a complete isolation. She didn't want to talk to me. She didn't want to see me. No matter how many times I tried to stop over, she would go into another room. So a part of me regrets not having that time, but I also feel like I feel okay with that because I know that I did what I could during that time to try to reach out. I just didn't have the knowledge of what was going on.
Wow. I mean, this sounds like it's so particular to you, and I appreciate you sharing.
Right.
Yeah, of course.
But it makes me curious. How is it that this act of forgiveness is different from the acts of because on the Pretty Social podcast, you guys just released an episode about forgiveness. How is this form of forgiveness different from the ones that you would give to like the friends from back in the day or people who've wronged you in the past?
Right.
How is this parental forgiveness different?
I think it's different from one, just the relationship in itself. Like for me, and this is just like my own opinion, like friends or people in the past who've hurt me, I feel like I can just forgive them. And then like, I can go my own route. Like I could never see them again. And that's okay. Like we're done with that. But for me, I can't do that for my mom. I can't forgive and separate from her. You're better than Darian.
You're better than Darian. Then let's just say that real quick.
No, and that's okay. Actually, and I don't advocate for everyone to do that, honestly, because I understand that some people, their situations are different, and maybe they had a parent who, you know, was abusing them or severely neglecting them or things like that, where they're like, I have to get away from you because I will stay in this toxic cycle. So I don't want to project, you know, my life and say this has to be someone else. I just know for me, I guess too, also with the knowledge I have now, that I can do my best to work on what I can in my relationship with my mom. So one, it just being my mom and me knowing that I have to have her in my life. And I have to do the best that I can to keep her in my life, which is forgiving her and then just sucking it up and going with, you know, the route of this disease and everything that comes along with it and taking care of her. So that's one reason why. And two, I think another is that I know her at her core, at who she was, you know, before this happened. So because I know her at her core and I know that this is not her, it's easier for me to be like, I can give you a pass almost to a degree because I know this is not coming from your heart. I know that you don't really feel this way for me. I know that you actually really do care for me. You just cannot compute that in your mind and in your heart all the time.
Right. And just to piggyback on that, what type of extra ability do you feel like it may have given you to go through this stage of forgiveness with your mom? Like, did it help you grow in empathy for other people? Did it change the way that you interact with your own son?
Yeah, definitely. So, one, it's developed an immense amount of patience. That's probably the biggest thing for me, because I'm not that I was always a very impatient person, but I definitely struggled with patience a lot in my life. And learning that I can't run from this. I have to see it through and I have to be patient with her in those moments, you know, in the highs and in the lows. It's definitely developed that in me. It's developed growth just all around of just, I've always been an empathetic person and just in my life, I feel like this is kind of like my whole life was set up essentially for this because I worked at a group home with individuals with MRDD and various disorders. So I've already kind of been in a realm like that. My brother was born with a developmental disability. Like I've seen this stuff. I've been around it my whole life. But the most intimate aspects that I am with my mom, it's just helped me to that empathy to just grow more, like to just be more understanding and to, you know, kind of put away my pride. Because sometimes I think to myself, like, I don't have to deal with this. Like, I really don't have to deal with this. I can literally just get up and someone else can take care of this. But then I had to put my pride aside and say, you know what? You wouldn't forgive yourself if you did that. But I think those are the ways that it's helped me grow.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
So since it took you so long to forgive your mom, do you feel like you owe her anything?
I feel like I don't. I feel like what I'm doing now is payback almost in the whole situation because, you know, I feel like I've sacrificed a huge portion of my life to move back in with her and take care of her. Even though the struggle is with her disorder, she doesn't fully understand or fully grasp that I have done that because sometimes she thinks she can just take care of herself. Mm-hmm. So I feel like me sacrificing so much of my life and time to invest in her is almost me paying her back for that time loss, even though she doesn't fully appreciate it, which is, again, a part of my struggle where I'm just like, I have to deal with that resentment sometimes. I'm like, you really don't see me cooking for you, cleaning for you, not going places because I have to stay here with you, all those type of things. But I have to remember that it doesn't matter what she sees. In my mind, it doesn't matter what she sees. It doesn't matter what she believes or perceives. All that matters is I know that I'm doing the best that I can and I'm helping her out the best way I can.
And I think that's one of the hardest things when it comes to forgiving anyone, realizing that their acceptance of you forgiving them. Like, they have to accept that they did wrong to accept that you forgave them as a virtue at all. But they don't owe you that.
Right.
They don't owe you the recognition that they have wronged you. And I think that's a difficult thing, even more so when we're talking about parents at all. And I know like I said, your situation is unique, but I think across the board, when you're forgiving your parents, what we were saying earlier is that a lot of times, even though we are quick and easy to judge the decisions that our parents make, they're doing the best that they can.
Yes.
And I think because they already know that, they don't feel like they wronged you. Like, they don't feel like they had any, like, you didn't have anything to get over. I gave you a great life.
And then another problem with that is we always get caught up. The forgiveness is not for them. It should be for ourselves.
Yeah.
So,
and that's what it is for me and my mom. Like you don't have to accept that, you know, like, I don't go up to her and say, I've forgiven you, but you don't have to accept that you did something wrong to me. I feel like if I said that to her right now, she'd probably like be super mad at me. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I'm never going to do that. But I also, you know, have to understand that just because I forgive her, that literally has nothing to do with her. Because honestly, at least in this particular situation, she probably won't even remember that she did or said the things that she did and said.
Right.
But it's more so peace for me, because it's like, you know what, for me, I'm like, I'm not going to choose to dwell on that, especially in my case where I know it wasn't intended to hurt me. And it's like, if I stay in a place, because I've been there, you know, I was there for almost 10 years and maybe even 10 years of dealing with those emotions and not really understanding the situation. It didn't feel good. It didn't feel good when I was harboring just negative feelings against her. And then when I chose to be like, you know what, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to forgive it. I'm going to let it go. Doesn't mean that those thoughts and those memories and stuff don't pop up and be like, dang, that hurt. But I'm choosing not to just dwell in that anymore.
Now, I'm in the process of dealing with something like that, forgiving my mom now. So I have a question. Does it feel like, since you forgave your mom, does it feel like it was for nothing since you still have them thoughts and feelings?
I don't feel like it's for nothing. I feel like what it does, it's almost like in my mind, if you were stabbed or if you were shot, you're going to have that scar there. You're always going to look down and see that scar on your arm where someone stabbed you. So you're never going to 100% forget that. That pain won't be there anymore when that person first stabbed you, but the scar will be there. And then you'll remember what that pain felt like. You remember how it was in that situation. So for me, that's how I kind of like correlate this situation with my mom, is that it's almost like an emotional scar that I know is still there, but it doesn't hurt to the degree that it used to, because I've made the decision to let it go. Now, if I would have, and again, for me, I would have continued to not forgive my mom and be mad at my mom, it would almost be like a constant open wound that's never healing. And it's just constantly hurting every single time and tearing you apart. And it's like, no, now it's just a memory. So I feel like it's helped me make a lot of strides just in life general, you know, because I feel like when that big of a part of your life is affecting you, especially with like a parent, it can really affect all different areas of your life. And I know that it was for me. So it's like, I not only had a healthier relationship with my mom after I chose to forgive, but just a healthier mindset and outlook on life after doing that.
Yeah, that was a great analogy. It also made me realize I have a long way to go, because
it's a journey.
I say that because every time I see my scar, it's like, I got to get my get back.
And you know what? You feel like that, especially in the beginning. I know for the beginning, my mom, there would be times where I'd be like, oh, you don't want to talk to me? I'm not going to talk to you. Like, I'll be just as petty. And you know, obviously looking back, I'm like, dang, I wish I didn't do that, because really, I wish I would have just pushed harder and harder in certain moments instead of just turning the petty side of me on.
Yeah.
But it kind of gives you a sense of satisfaction when you do that, especially when you don't know where it's coming from. Like, then I didn't know where it was coming from. So for me, I'm like, oh, you're going to treat me bad? Like, I'm just not going to like be in your life, or I'm just not going to see you this weekend, or I'm just not going to answer your call this time around.
You sound just like me.
Yeah. And it makes you feel good. But then in the long run, again, knowing me and know how empathetic I am, know how deeply rooted in my emotions I am, if I would have continued to let that be that, even now knowing what her disorder is, I know that eventually I would have never forgiven myself for the strain that I put on the relationship, because I was caught up in my emotions. I was caught in my pride. I was focused on me versus the whole picture.
That is, that's eye-opening for sure. I'm curious though, because I assumed that, and Darian proved me wrong earlier about this. I assumed that we all kind of developed into the growth period. We all grew into the forgiveness of our parents, but Darian said that he didn't start forgiving his mom until like yesterday. And
Yeah.
you said you didn't even start your resentment of your mom until later on in your life.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, because once you started resenting your mom, you already had a kid.
Yeah, I did.
How do these types of relationships, whether it's the resentment of your mom or the growth in forgiveness of your mom, how do these types of things affect your relationship with your son, in the ways that, you know, you intend and maybe you don't?
So I had seen both good and bad, actually, if I'm going to be honest. There were times when it was really bad with my mom and my son was younger, and I would be stressed out over it. And instead of, I hate to say take it out on my mom, but, just allow myself to voice those frustrations with my mom, sometimes I would take that home. And, if he's, being too loud, instead of me saying, hey, Nate, be quiet, it's like, be quiet. Like, it would just be like, I would project those feelings at home because I was so stressed out because of this relationship. But then once I realized how frustrated I was getting at home for no reason, and understanding that that's not for my son, that's because I'm mad at my mom, then I started to almost overcompensate. I mean, in a good way, like of being a parent, and like just taking more time to be extra loving, extra kind, extra careful of, how I present myself, what I say, what I do, and trying to be like the most perfect mom possible. And it was a hard thing to not kind of balance, because I don't want to be too much and too overbearing, but obviously I didn't want to be on the other spectrum of, frustrated and angry, and him being, him not really understanding where this is coming from. So it took a little while for me to learn how to balance that. I mean, now obviously with him being so much older and him also understanding, what's going on with my mom, there's just more understanding in general of a lot of things. And even now, if I'm going to be honest, because I have so much on my plate and I still take care of my mom and do other things, there are still times that I come home and I get frustrated and I say things and I, act in a certain way that I shouldn't act. And, my son will be like, oh, you had a hard day, didn't you? And I'm like, dang it, I did it. Like, I have to constantly remind myself, like, you can't be like that. But then I also say, I'm just human. So there's good and bad that's come from it. But, it's a hard thing to balance.
Near impossible. Yeah.
It is. And like you said before, the statement you made earlier is, we can only do the best that we can. Like, literally it all boils down to we're human beings. And that's another thing that I've had to remind myself, is that we all have different journeys. We all experience different things in life, and that's essentially molds us into who we are, the good and the bad. And, I used to be someone who, if someone was mean, or like if someone comes to my work and they're really mean and rude, I'd be like, dang, they're like the Grinch, they're like Scrooge, like what's wrong with them? Like, they need to learn manners and stuff like that. But then I had to, as I've experienced stuff in my life, realize that, they might be struggling a lot in life, and I don't know what their struggles are, and they may not know how to cope with those struggles appropriately. And they're just projecting those emotions everywhere else, because I've been there. So it helps me to be more empathetic and understanding, when people have downfalls, because we're literally human and we can only do the best that we can.
Yeah. It was like right before you came on, I was saying how, our parents deal with things that we don't know. And once you get older and you start to deal with some of those things yourself, it's so much easier to give them like the benefit of the doubt. Obviously, it's in retrospect now, but it's so much easier to say these mistakes that I saw growing up that I considered mistakes, they're not only the best you could do, but the fact that you were able to do this good is actually a feat in itself. Like you, the tools that you had just weren't adequate, and you were still able to make such a sensible and good life for me.
For sure.
So,
and it's amazing to think like that, because I mean, in my own situation with my mom, you know, she had been struggling this. I mean, she was born with it, and it usually doesn't develop until later in life. But I remember even times in high school where she had moments of extreme depression, and like she used to journal all the time before she got worse. And, you know, as she had gotten worse and I started taking care of her, I finally read some of her journals for the first time, and I was like, oh my gosh, she was battling just so much, and it was so heavy. But I can remember her still, you know, walking around and singing and smiling and taking us places and pushing through that. And I'm just thinking to myself, oh my gosh, like I didn't understand how much she actually was going through with this disease, because no one knew what was going on. But when she was healthier, she was still doing the best she could. And really, for what she was battling in her journals, like what she was able to produce and do for us was absolutely amazing.
Magic. Yeah.
That's incredible. You even got to read the journals.
Like, that is beautiful.
It's incredible, but it was also, there were times where I'm like, man, I don't know if I should be reading this, because it was an eye opener, but it was like, wow, this is like some really heavy stuff. And for me, it's like, dang, I wish I would have known that, because even though if I was 16, 17, 18, I may have not known what to say, but then I would have had an understanding and been more empathetic of like, man, she's dealing with this. Like, she may not even want to live. And here I am as a teenager, just being stupid and dumb and having, just talking back and things like that. I'm like, dang, I wish I would have, you know, lighten up a bit, but I didn't know. And like I said, I have to even forgive myself for that, because I didn't know.
Right.
Like if someone doesn't tell you what's going on, you just have to come up with your own assumptions.
Yeah, and that's really such a great perspective, because like I'm realizing during this conversation, like forgiveness is like a race, okay? And hear me out. Like there's a time on forgiveness and you don't know it. Some people beat it, some people don't. And if you beat it, you're good. But if you don't, you have them regrets.
Oh, regrets. Oh, yes.
Yep,
Last year, I almost lost that race.
That's a full fact. That's a full fact.
It just made me realize I'm bothered that I don't know the time of how long this lasts.
Well, that's why you got to assume, and this is what I've always advocated for you.
Right. I'm so prideful.
You got to assume that it's right now.
Yeah.
You got to assume that today is the last time. And that's how,
you
like,
have to,
if you don't
know,
you have no idea, bro.
Yeah.
We've kept you plenty long, Gabby. We really appreciate you coming
so
on.
Much. Thank you for having me on.
I would love to ask one more question though, because you did bring up how empathetic it seems your son Nate is as well.
Yeah.
I'm curious, are there things that you feel that you are prepared for Nate to forgive you for, even if he never voices them? Are there things that you are expecting that you may have dropped the ball in the past, especially in the times of, you know, your depression and your struggles? Do you have anything that you're willing to share here?
That's a great question.
Oh, definitely. I mean, and for me, I'm a little different than maybe a lot of parents, because a lot of people, my peers I talk to who are parents are like, I'm not telling my kids, I'm not asking for forgiveness for my kid. And I'm the parent that's like going to my son, like, you know, after, and it typically, if I'm gonna be honest, it's not always after I do something. Like maybe it takes a few hours, maybe it takes a day for me to like put the pride away. But then I usually always go to him and say, I'm so sorry for that. And I've apologized for things in the past. But I'm sure there's still things that I've missed that I didn't even realize I've done and said, that he has to forgive me for. And I would hope that if there is anything that's on his heart that bothers him, that I never realized that I hurt him in that way, that he would let me know so I can, you know, keep our relationship good and strong, and that he can gain, or he can forgive me for those things. But yeah, I'm not perfect. I dropped the ball. I messed up. There's things that I just wish that I could take back. Like, I wish I wouldn't be so stressed at a period of time for him, and that, I could have poured more into him instead of me, just focusing on myself and my own little world of what's going on. But I think too, with his age, he understands and he sees everything on my plate. But just because he understands, I don't want him to make a pass and be like, oh, that was just mom. It was okay. Like, she was just stressed out. She has a lot on her plate. Like, I still want him to have that open dialogue with me to say, like, this really hurt me. And like, I need to let you know that. And I'm completely open to those conversations.
That's beautiful. That's amazing.
Really, because I come from probably just like Savon. We come from like a generation. Parents don't really.
Boy,
apologize.
if you don't shut up.
Parents don't really apologize. Like,
what did I say?
Come eat dinners. That's the apology. Like, so for you to recognize your son as his own person and not just your property or something, that shit is really hard to do. And I knew I was doing better. I don't want to say better, improved for my parent. Is I apologize to my daughter. Like, again, it do take some time. Like, you got to realize, like, you hurt someone. This is also a person. It's only right you apologize. Age doesn't mean anything. You did wrong to a person, you apologize.
Right.
So I think
they're little mini human beings.
Right.
Yeah, they're only your kid for so long. Like, that is
right.
Your son is right around the corner from being a grown ass man.
He's right around the corner. And we have to understand they still have emotions. Like, you can't just brush it under the rug because you did something wrong and you have too much pride to go back and say I'm sorry. And it's like this little person, their emotions are harder to regulate than us as adults. So they may carry that for a long time and be confused and be upset and think like mom or dad doesn't like me, or they think this of me because they said this, or they did this, or they weren't here during this time that I needed them. And they can't compute that in their minds because they're still maturing, they're still growing. So if we as parents don't actively say, I was wrong, I don't want you to think what I did or what I said was right. Because sometimes if you continuously do that, those kids will grow up doing and saying the same things because they just thought that that's normal. And I don't want to create that standard of normalcy for my son, that the downfalls that I've had as a parent is something that he should do as well, because mom never went back and said, hey, I was wrong. I'm
so glad you brought that up, because I think that's a reason for a lot of this generation's emotional deficiencies. Like, we come from people, and this is why I say that it's even more of a feat for our parents to have made even passable human beings, because they were raised by people with severe emotional deficits, who were raised by people with even more severe emotional deficits. Every level of evolution of our emotional abilities, of our intellectual abilities, is gigantic. Just the fact that we were able to make it out of who we were raised by, like overcoming our parenting, had to come from our parents overcoming their parenting. So, I think every conscious step toward, breaking these curses, it's proven that it's one of the most valuable things you can do for a kid.
Yeah, and you'll start to go in the right direction generationally. Like, if you're doing your best, you're doing better than what your parents did, and you're learning from their mistakes, and you're applying that as you being a parent. Like, you're going to still make mistakes, but then your kids are going to have a little bit of a better outlook on life because their parents had made some adjustments from how they were raised. And now, they can take that on to their children and their children's children, for future generations.
Well, we greatly appreciate you coming on. Everybody who's listening now, check out Pretty Social Podcast anywhere that you listen to podcasts.
Yes. Thank you guys for letting me come on here. I feel so blessed to be on this podcast. You guys haven't had anyone on there
shout
yet.
Out,
so
you
like,
not only
superstar.
You're the first guest. You're the first mom. My mom is actually going to have to do some forgiving, because there's no way she wasn't the first mom on my podcast.
Oh, no. I'm sorry. Tell her I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
Either way, we really appreciate it. We hope you have a good night.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you. You guys too.
Her parental forgiveness was so in her face, because there were things that her mom did that her mom didn't necessarily have control over.
Right.
So I think that feeling, as you brought up and as she admitted to, that feeling of, oh, she didn't deserve my criticisms, man, that's a heavy thing to deal with.
Yeah.
And I dealt with that myself. Just like I said, the deficiencies that all of our parents have that we don't think about because we don't have them.
Mm-hmm.
That's a difficult thing to accept once you are old enough to accept them. It's a difficult thing to accept because you're like, wow, look how I was treating this person, even if it was just mentally, even if it was just in your brain, the judgments that you were passing. It's like, man, look at how I was judging this person who was doing so well with what they had, with what they had to make do. I absolutely feel that way. Just the things that my mom dealt with that I didn't fully understand until I was older, or the things that my mom shielded me from that I didn't fully understand until I was older. It's like, man, all of these criticisms that I had, and here you are making magic
Out of nothing,
bro. So I really appreciate her perspective, especially being one where, like I said, the forgiveness is so in your face. The you were wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say that because that almost invalidates the feelings of, like, maybe there were shortcomings. I'm sure that it's not easy to deal with her.
But in her situation, it was just simply not her mom's fault.
Right. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't affecting her. Right. So, like, the effect that it's having on you, that has to, there's only so many ways that we as children know how to deal with that. And I don't mean children like literally under the age of 18. I mean, when someone is your parent, there's a certain dynamic in the relationship. And when you feel like you're not getting what you need in any capacity, it hurts, man. It hurts in a very particular way. And you take that hurt out on them, even if it's not, again, even if it's not verbal or not like a direct thing. Those moments where she's saying, I'm not going to see you this weekend, or the way that you take it, the way that you do it, where you're like, I'm not even going to speak to my mom for however long it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be faced with the fact that was the wrong thing to do, it hurts. Like when you found out, if you want to tell your story.
So it definitely hurts, but what my battle is, my mom never treated me like a person. It was just like property. Like if I said something, it was just didn't mean anything. You just listen to what I say. My opinion doesn't matter. No voice. And I think that's still my problem till this day. Like last time we got in an argument, I'm grown. That's what she told me. Like, I'm your mom. I don't have to have this conversation with you. And I think that's why it's so hard for me to get over it, because we can't have a conversation.
Yeah, I can definitely say that it's easier. The process of forgiveness is easier when they do give you that
space.
When they give you the not even the space to speak, but when they give you the satisfaction of admitting that there may have been better, that they could have done better. I think it's a lot easier to do the forgiving step when they will admit that there were, other things that they could have done. But like I was saying with Gabby on the phone, though, they don't know you that. Like, your forgiveness, how I don't, how I don't like saying should, but your forgiveness shouldn't be tied to their acknowledgement of their wrongdoing.
But that's not even she won't even acknowledge what I say.
But that's because, and that's what, this is what I'm saying.
And I know people can't take criticism well. I get that. But it's that, just hear me. Hear me out.
But it's the same problem that you grew up with. That I think that's where I'm coming from when it comes to your situation. Mm-hmm. The same problem you grew up with was that your mom's old school.
Yeah.
Kids are meant to be seen, not heard. And here you are trying to be heard. And one of the things that you're forgiving her for is that the way that things worked when she was raised,
That's how she used it.
that's how she knows.
Yeah.
That's what she knows. And maybe what she knows isn't the best case scenario, but that's not her fault.
But I'm looking at it like, how can I forgive someone who still's hitting me?
That's a great question. But just like Gabby was saying, she doesn't mean to hit you.
I can't accept that yet.
Why?
I don't know. And I think it's because I'm not her. And I think that's the only person in my life who don't hear me.
This does not need to be therapy, and I don't want it to be therapy.
Mm-hmm.
But you use that same tactic when you're upset with somebody.
Fuck. I'm just as bad as her.
Maybe
And
not. Maybe not.
I
Maybe
know
not.
better.
Just
I know
as,
better.
Well.
I know better.
But you don't, though, is the point. This is literally the point that I'm making. The fact that you clearly don't know better. Like it's your natural reaction is the thing that hurts you. Like that's what you're going to use to hurt people when you feel hurt. You know? And I think that even like because you struggle with it, I think that even opens the door for you to even more so be empathetic, because you can tell that even when you quote unquote know better, you can't do any better. Like you know better and you can't do any better.
Because I'm not realizing the wrong I'm doing in the moment.
You sound like your mom.
In the moment.
You sound like your
But
mom then.
listen, okay, so now like you just said it. I didn't disagree with that because that is true. I heard that plenty of times, but I'm not in the moment of doing it, so I can accept that. There's never a moment my mom will just not accept that at all. And I think that's why it's so hard for me to forgive her. It's like she's always in that moment.
Do you think that it's reasonable? Hear me out here. Do you think that it's reasonable that in a generation, and it's a gigantic generation, right? Mm-hmm. Like your mom is old school.
Mm-hmm.
In one generation, things have improved by one step. You're saying that there's only one step missing between what your mom does and what you do. So you've gotten better by one step, probably due to your mom not being better that one step. Is it not reasonable to say that the improvement
was because of her?
Is at least that one step. From generation to generation, at least one step has been, like we've evolved past that.
Yes.
Then, bro, your job is to make it two. Your job is to get better at one thing that you know your mom's not good at, and then improve on something that you never even associated with your mom. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
These are, I'm telling you, man, I don't think there was anything more freeing than finally understanding the things that my parents could not have done better at. And when I say that, I don't mean that there weren't better options. That's not what I'm saying when I say that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying the same way that I couldn't have said that sentence a different way because I said the sentence that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like these are the words that I chose because I'm just inclined to have chosen them that way. You know?
Mm-hmm.
The decisions that they made were the best that they knew to make. It was the way that it had to go. I held a lot of resentment to my mom because she's aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I was growing up, it always felt like she was angry, and it always felt like she was aggressive. And it really bothered me because it felt like kind of like what Gabby was saying, like, man, do you even like me? Like, why are you so mean? Why are you so angry all the time? And then as I get older, like all of her strict rules and stuff like that, I'm realizing, oh, she was protecting me from my environment.
Mm-hmm.
She was so strict because she wanted me to stay away from the negative influences in the environment that I was growing up in. And when I realized some of the things that she was going through while I was a kid, I'm like, oh, it wasn't anger. Like, you weren't angry with me. You're dealing with these things in your own world. You're more than just my mom. I think that's something that was real difficult for me to get through. No, it was, I'll take that back. It was impossible for me to get through that until I was grown, where I'm like, oh, this lady is more than just my mom. Like, she's a person too. She's got a life.
Thought about it like that.
Like, she's got a life, bro. And the things that she was dealing with, I'm like, wow. Like, you were so nice. Like, you were, and don't get me wrong, man. Like, I don't invalidate young Savon's feelings. I was affected in those ways in reality. But I think the cause of those is way easier to stomach now and even appreciate. It's not even that I like am dealing with it. Like, I'm appreciating how little she actually took out on me, you know? And the same with my pop. Like, it was like a joint custody type situation. I only saw my pop every other weekend. And a lot of times I really hated my relationship with my dad. I felt like he didn't try hard enough. And it wasn't until I was grown that I realized how difficult it must be, you know, seeing some of these situations myself, how difficult it must be having a baby mom, only getting to see your kid once every couple of weeks. Like, the difficulties that our parents deal with, once you realize them, once you can recognize them, like almost face to face, it's so much easier to say, "No, thank you," and I feel like I feel you, like I understand now, like I understand what you were that you were going through. I don't necessarily understand what they were going through because you know, we don't have these conversations too often,
right?
But I understand that you were going through something. I understand that the things that I disliked didn't stem from you just like being mean, you just not being the parent that I wanted you to be, you not being a Disney Channel parent. Like, it wasn't just you choosing, oh yeah, you're not going to get the new Jays. You're like, all those other kids, they're going to get the new Jays, and, you know, they're going to go to Kalahari with their dad, and, you know, you're going to hang out with your dad once every couple of weeks. Like,
right.
It wasn't like a decision by either of them to be the parents that they were. It was a culmination of literally everything that their lives had been before me.
Right.
And dude, it was one of the most powerful experiences forgiving my parents, because I have such a strong ability now to forgive other people for their shortcomings. And I'm so understanding, kind of like what Gabby was saying, how when that person comes into her job and they're mean, she's like, oh, they might be dealing with something. Like, man, everybody feels like they're past to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, everybody feels like what they've gone through to me. And that's I don't know, man. It feels really good to be able to see people as probably doing their fucking best, man.
Yeah. And this conversation make me think, like, just stop focusing on what they didn't do and what they did instead.
Yes, sir.
Like,
yes, sir.
I don't know why I'm fixated on what they didn't do.
Because that's what affected you. That's the thing that you see, that you internalize as affecting you. That's why. The thing that you're because we've already talked about before, I don't know if it's been on the podcast, but we've already talked about before how moms are superheroes.
Right.
They make magic. It's what they do. So you already accept the positive thing. You accept that, oh yeah, my mom did great things and I appreciate what she did. But the thing that is like glaring to you is the fact that, oh, I'm not heard. You know, that's like a big deal to you. So that's what you dwell on. And that's understandable. It's just not charitable, you know?
I agree with you on that.
So yeah, we want to hear what you guys think about forgiving your parents. This is something like I'm very overly opinionated about this, like very overly opinionated about it. And it's one of the few things that I think everyone should go through. And it's not even like I usually don't do the should thing because you got to have a goal to know where you're headed. But I think everybody should go through this. And I would even disagree with Gabby in those extreme cases. Obviously, I would never tell someone who's in an extreme case, I wouldn't say, oh yeah, you have to go and forgive them. But I think forgiving circumstances is like quintessential to being like a more peaceful person and a more empathetic person. Like I can forgive the circumstances of like pretty despicable people. And that's just because, bro, we are all just a culmination of all of the things that led up to us being here. And I can forgive y'all for that. So, oh, by the way, when doing the wrap up today, I have to let you know our podcast name was written incorrectly on our Instagram this whole time.
No, it wasn't.
It was.
Nah.
It was Overly Opinionated podcast instead of Opinionated.
Are you serious?
I'm so serious. Bro, I uploaded a clip today and I felt like an idiot.
Do you know what's so funny about that? Somebody asked for our podcast name and I typed it up and it was wrong. And I was 100% sure I spelled opinion correct.
Right.
And I'm like, okay. It went to just no page. Like,
oh.
And then I had to go copy and paste our name. I thought shit was just tripping.
Yep.
Wow.
This is why. So we had to switch it up a little bit. Our wrap up is going to be a little different from here on out. I guess this is what we get for not coming up with an original name. Hit us up at the Overly Opinionated Pod on Instagram, at the Pod Boys on Twitter, and the Overly Opinionated Pod at gmail.com for all the geezers out there. Let us know what y'all think. Let us know how y'all feel about the guest thing. Honestly, It doesn't really matter that much how y'all feel about it because I really liked it. So we're probably going to be doing that again in the future, especially for perspectives that we don't have the ability to give,
right,
but feel would be valuable on the show. And we will see y'all next Wednesday.
Goodbye.